Okay, good evening again. Zazen Wasan. We'll do what we usually do. I will go through it one time so you get the feeling of it, and then I'll go through it a second time and provide some commentary on it, and then I will stop recording and we will have a discussion about it. Zazen Wasan. From the beginning, all beings are Buddha. Like water and ice, without water no ice, outside us no Buddhas. How near the truth, yet how far we seek. Like one in water, crying, I thirst. Like a child of rich birth wandering poor on this earth, we endlessly circle the six realms. The cause of our sorrow is ego delusion. From dark path to dark path we've wandered in darkness. How can we be free of birth and death? The gateway to freedom is Zazen Samadhi. Beyond exaltation, beyond all our praises, the pure Mahayana, upholding the precepts, repentance and refuge, repentance and giving, the countless good deeds and the way of right living, all come from Zazen. This one true Samadhi extinguishes evil. It purifies karma, dissolving obstructions. Then where are the dark paths to lead us astray? The pure lotus land is not far away. Hearing this truth, heart humble and grateful, to praise and embrace it, to practice its wisdom, brings unending blessings, brings mountains of merit. And when we turn inward and prove our true nature, that true self is no self, our own self is no self, we go beyond ego and past clever words, and the gateway to the oneness of cause and effect is thrown open. Not two and not three, straight ahead lies the way. Our form now being no form, in going and coming we never leave home. Our thoughts now being no thoughts, our dancing and songs are the voice of the Dharma. How vast is the heaven of boundless Samadhi, how bright and transparent the moonlight of wisdom. What is there outside us? What is there we lack? Nirvana is openly shown to our eyes. This very land is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. Beautiful, huh? Mm-hmm. So let's go through it together. Let's go through it a little more slowly. I see somebody has just joined us, so let me post that again. So that, once again, that's in the chat window for those who need it. From the very beginning, all beings are Buddha. The beginning. When is the beginning? Beginning, the Buddhist teaching is this is beginningless. Suffering is beginningless. It can come to an end. The beginning is birth. The beginning is when formation starts to happen. All beings are Buddha. Now that's a slippery one too. Yes. We're all enlightened, we just don't know it. This is like dusting a mirror is a metaphor that's often used for this. It's one that, but there's no mirror and there's no dust, there's no mirror for the dust to light on. But if you imagine a mirror, and you can't see in the mirror because it's covered in dust, and if you dust and you polish the mirror, eventually it becomes really clear and shiny and you can see, and then you see you are Buddha. Water, the reflection in water, imagine the moon reflected in water, but the water's rippling, so you don't even know what it is, and then the ripples eventually all settle out and you realize it's the moon, and then you look at the moon and you are the moon. So we're all Buddha, but we just don't know it. Like water and ice, without water, no ice. So I'm in this sack of skin and bones, this meat suit right now. At least I think I am. But that's going to change. It already has many times over the last 50 or 60 years that I've been incarnated, right? Water and ice, they're the same thing, but they just look very different. Outside us, no Buddhas. How near the truth, yet how far we seek. All those stories of, there's there's lots of versions of this, but there's a book which we read on our Wednesday night reading group many years ago of a young American who was a Zen practitioner, and he was tired of all this American Zen, so he went to a Japanese monastery and thought he'd find real Zen out there, and he thought he had found real Zen, and then he came home and he realized it was already right here and he didn't have to go anywhere. Only he actually had to go all that way and come all the way back to realize that he didn't need to do that. In the Quran there's a line, we're closer to you than your jugular vein. How near the truth, yet how far we seek. Like one in water crying I thirst, like a child of rich birth wandering poor on this earth. That's a direct allusion to a story out of the Lotus Sutra. And it's there is an important connection between Zen and Lotus Sutra. Dogen's teachings. Dogen was he came out of the Zen tradition, out of the Tian Tai, which was a Lotus Sutra tradition, and he was. If you read his Shobogenzo, you can read it as koan commentary, and you can read it as Lotus Sutra commentary. There's an awful lot of the Lotus Sutra in there. So the Lotus Sutra practice is very heavily in form. So the child of rich birth wandering poor on this earth, father who's lost his son, wandered off when he was younger, father is very affluent, sees his son in the distance who's a beggar, and he tries to encourage him to come back, and the son is scared because what's this rich man going to do? Anyway, so he gets into work shoveling night dirt in the background somewhere. He dresses up in dirty clothes, goes and helps, gets to know him, promotes him, and eventually on his deathbed, he's just made him in charge of all of his finances, says, "You're my son, this is all yours." That's the child of rich birth wandering poor on this earth. The cause of our sorrow is ego delusion. No secrets there. The ego is a delusion. It's not real. We make it up. It makes itself up. It's very clever, very deceptive. From dark path to dark path, we've wandered in darkness. How can we be free of birth and death? Awakening is freedom from birth and death, because once you realize you're not this, there's nothing that's born and there's nothing that dies. And that's, you're not this is kind of misleading as well. Maybe we'll get back to that. The gateway to freedom is Zazen Samadhi, two words that are plugged together. Zazen comes from Chan, which is the Chinese tradition. In turn comes Dhyana, which is a Sanskrit word which basically means meditation. So Zen basically means meditation, but Zazen is typically translated as just sitting. The idea being sitting is the form of meditation, and just sitting is there's nothing else going on. There's no activity, there's no fabrications, there's no thoughts, there's just sitting, just presence in sitting. Samadhi. Samadhi is a state of concentration or absorption. I read recently, this was actually a really wonderful commentary to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, where I've forgotten the author's name. He said, so if you manage to pay attention to something for 12 seconds, that's concentration. If you manage to pay attention to it, to keep your mind on it, for 12 times 12 seconds, which is about 2.5 minutes, that's meditation. If you manage to keep your attention on it for 12 times that, which is about 20-25 minutes, that's Sankalpa Samadhi. Sankalpa means with a kind of a skillful mental formation. It means you really are absorbed, but you're still absorbed on something. There's still an activity of being absorbed, of paying attention to something. If you manage to stay on that object or on that idea or theme for 12 times that, which is about 5.5 hours, then that is nirvikalpa. Nir without vikalpa is a thought, an idea, a formation, a mental fabrication. That is complete absorption, emerging into. Nirvikalpa samadhi is where there is no distinction between subject and object. All there is just non-dual awareness. So samadhi is just this state of concentration, and that sequence of multiplying by 12 I find just an interesting and useful way of looking at how subtle it is, and how the stability of our practice allows us to sink deeper and deeper into these samadhis. Kind of the same thing as the jhanas, really. Beyond exaltation, beyond all our praises, the pure Mahayana. We'll leave that one alone. Upholding the precepts, repentance and giving, the 1,000 good deeds and the way of right living all come from Zazen. This is pointing at following the precepts, essentially. True good deeds, true right livelihood, true right living simply comes out of an awakening mind. That we don't have to, as the awakening mind really starts to open up, we no longer have to think about doing good deeds. We no longer have to think about what's right. As we become truly connected with the other, as we truly bring the boundaries down and realize two hands, there's only one hand. When we realize, when we truly live this non-separation, then everything is me. So of course I'm going to act in a wise and compassionate way towards it. That's what that's pointing at. This one true samadhi extinguishes evils. Evil, in this context, this is not good and evil. This is, evil really means ignorance. Evil means not seeing the truth, not following the Dharma. It purifies karma, dissolving obstructions. So purifies karma. There are four karma. There are three karmas in a fourth category, I guess. There's good karma, which is where you do good deeds, and that, like in the classic vernacular, you get a much better rebirth. There's bad karma, the consequences of which you end up with a bad rebirth. And there's mixed karma, which will have consequences in both directions, both of which will show up in this life, next life, whatever. And then there's just no karma. No karma. Imagine acting and not generating karma. If there is no ego, there's no identity, there can be no selfish intent in action if there's no ego. Because there's nobody to benefit from that. That action is without karma. This is purifying karma, is moving to the place where existing karma runs out and no new karma is generated. Dissolving obstructions. In that sense, karma is the obstruction. The other obstruction is our mental fabrications, but as we move to a place where no karma is generated, the fabrications are going to fall away as well. It's not that there's nothing there, but we're not making things out of it. It's not that there isn't suffering, but we're not reifying this into concrete beings that are separate from me. It's the separation that's the problem. This is the obstructions. Then where are the dark paths to lead us astray? And this is pointing back to the beginning. From the very beginning, all beings are Buddha. As we start to wake up, we realize that the thing that was preventing us from seeing that we are a Buddha is simply something we made up. It's our own ignorance, self bootstrapping into existence ignorance. The pure lotus land, there it is again, is not far away. Hearing this truth, heart humble and grateful, to praise and embrace it, to practice its wisdom. There's something that people don't like to talk about in Buddhism. There's an element of devotion in this. I feel it's more than an element of devotion. The title is usually translated as Song of Zazen, but it is also translated more like Hymn in Praise of Zazen. And Hakuin had in his writings and in writings about him, there was a lot of this more devotional side to Hakuin. There was a really crusty, hard side to him, but there was also a really beautiful devotional side to him. So this is beautiful praise, to praise and embrace it. To practice its wisdom brings unending blessings, brings mountain of merit. There are no blessings, there are no merit, and yet this generates a whole bunch of it, right? And then we dedicate it to others. And when we turn inward and prove our true nature, what is our true nature? Our true nature, what is the true nature of this Gareth sitting here in front of you all? The true nature is of no self. There is nothing here. If you really peel this apart, it's like the trunk of a plantain plant. You peel it apart and there's nothing there. It's like you give a raccoon a sugar cube. It will wash the sugar cube to get the dirt, to make the dirt come off the outside, so it's got the clean food inside, and it will wash the sugar cube. There's no sugar cube left. The true nature of self is no self. Is the inability to find something to hold on to here that I can really call me. And when we realize that, we go beyond ego and past clever words. Clever words are up here. Clever words are to pass this all out, try and make sense of it. Once we've woken up to what this really is, there's no use for clever words. Clever words can't capture it to start with. But there's also no use, which is why in Zen there's a lot of slamming doors on people's feet and hitting people with sticks and whatever, which are like the shock. It's turning words is another one. It's a more gentle one where there's a gesture that I'll get to the point. There's a monk who's confused, and the teacher asks the monk a question. And as the monk starts to answer, the teacher reaches out and puts his hand over his mouth. And what that's doing, that is holding the formation before it forms. So it's finding that place where, without yet losing touch of unborn and without yet becoming born, there's this unarticulated partial thought. Not even a partial thought, partially formed thought. So there are these ways of abruptly helping people to wake up without clever words. Then the gateway to the oneness of cause and effect is thrown open. We think we live in a linear world of objects where things cause other things to happen. Linear temporal world with objects where we think this cause and effect actually happens. But that's because we're stuck in this world. We're stuck in a world of space and time. This consciousness, by definition, is a consciousness trapped in space and time. So this consciousness is going to experience cause and effect. Because there's this linear experience, and I find something that I know came because of these other things. But if you went through time backwards, cause and effect works the other way around, actually. And you can't have an effect without a cause. So something doesn't become a cause until the effect has happened anyway. There's lots of ways of passing that, but cause and effect aren't linear. The reality of cause and effect is not this linear thing that we like to think of. Not two and not three, straight ahead runs the way. What I believe that's alluding to is a teaching that comes out of the Lotus Sutra tradition. It's Shi Yi, who was a great Lotus Sutra scholar who also contributed a huge amount to the emergence of Chan. And I think he was 6th century, something like that. China. Not the two are the born and the unborn, the manifest and the unmanifest, the relative and the absolute. Those are the two, and we're familiar with the two. But what happens with teaching over time is it becomes calcified, and people lock in on these two things as different things. But they're not different things. They're not even different faces of the same thing. They can't be separated. So to lock in on these as two different things and wake up from the relative to experience the absolute is completely missing the point. They can't be separated. So these then become teaching tools, and the third becomes these two not being separated. So not two and not three. Straight ahead lies the way. Just do it. Just sit. Just eat your food. Our form now being no form. When I realize this is not me, when I realize that I'm not contained by this, trapped in time, trapped in space, trapped in physical form, I'm always at home, wherever and whatever. This I ceases to mean anything, and it ceases to mean the same thing. Our thought now being no thought. We take our thoughts so seriously, but they're just the same. They're total ephemera. Our thought now being no thought, our dancing and songs are the voice of the Dharma. The Dharma is the teaching, it is the law, it is things being what they are. The Dharma is a very subtle, nuanced word. We often think of it as meaning lots of things. It's really not. It's not that it means lots of things. It's very subtle and nuanced, so we tease different things out of it. But it's a way of describing things are just the way they are. And our dancing and songs are just that. Our dancing and songs are just that. How vast is the heaven of boundless samadhi. This samadhi we talked about earlier, it just collapses time and space. It takes, it is beyond time and space. Let's just leave it there. So, it's utterly boundless. How bright and transparent the moonlight of wisdom. Wisdom is often talked about as there's the moonlight and the sunlight, and they're used in different ways. And one of the reasons to distinguish between moonlight and sunlight is sunlight is bright and clear, and it shines light on everything, and it makes everything visible. So we can see clearly with sunlight. The moonlight we can see, but it's cool. The sun is hot, the moon is cool. And it's a more subtle light. So that's the valence that this poem is trying to bring to the brightness and transparency of wisdom. What is there outside us? What is there we lack? Nothing, right? Nothing. It's already here. You have everything you need, as the Buddha said in the Pali Canon, in this fathom-long body. You have everything you need to wake up, right here in this fathom-long body. Nirvana is openly shown to our eyes. Our eyes need to change a little bit to see it, but it's right here. This earth where we stand is the pure lotus land. We're already there, we've just got to see it. And this very body, the body of Buddha. Now you've got to ask what this very body is, because there are 3 bodies of Buddha. There's the Sambhogakaya, which is the manifest body, which is what shows up in the world and teaches and helps and eats and dies of food poisoning. There's the Nirmanakaya. Well, let's do the other one first. There's the Dharmakaya, which is think the absolute, think the unborn. Think, in many traditions, that would be, it would be Brahman in the Sanatana Dharma. It would be, It's the unborn. It's just the unborn. And then there's the Nirmanakaya, which is it's translated in lots of different ways. But if you think of the three major bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva is the Bodhisattva of great activity, and that's really what the Nirmanakaya is about. It's enlightened activity. It's this coming together. It's the third. It's the third of the not two and not three. It's this coming together of wisdom and compassion as Tathagata, as not landing on an ego, and yet landing on being present in a way to act with wisdom and compassion to save all beings. And I didn't tell you, Hakuin, I should have looked up his dates before I started. Hakuin was the guy who wrote this, and that's Dick's backdrop. Thank you once again, Dick, for being right on point and preparing so thoroughly. I think he was 17th century. He was Japanese, Rinzai. He's a truly remarkable guy, and he was a major reformer of Rinzai Zen. Rinzai was falling into significant decline at the time, and Hakuin revitalized it, re-energized it, and the Zen Koan, among other things, the Zen Koan tradition that comes down through that practice is largely a result of the work that Hakuin did at the time. He had some. He was a very forward-thinking, if you would. He was way ahead of his time on gender, sexual orientation of his disciples, all sorts of stuff. I mean, he's just a really interesting guy. Anyway, that's enough of me talking. I will push the button to stop.